The 2025 NFL Draft is still a few months away, but let's go ahead and do my top 10 quarterbacks of the 2025 NFL Draft. But if you guys do go on to enjoy the video, hit the like and subscribe button. Let's hop into it. We are going to begin with at number 10, Riley Leonard. Now, I really do like Riley Leonard as a person, as a human being. I think he's a really good, high character player who really does have a tenacity that you want to see within the quarterback position. This is somebody that's going to do whatever it takes to find a way to win a game. Where Riley Leonard kind of falls short is he's very similar in some ways to like Daniel Jones in terms of like he is accurate but isn't aggressive at all. Like, I can't really tell you how many times I saw Riley Leonard take a genuine shot down the field that wasn't wide open. You look at guys like Matthew Stafford and Patrick Mahomes in his prime, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, those guys take chances downfield. Those are your high-level starters. Those are your high-level guys who have been making deep downfield reads for years. That's just not something that Riley Leonard just does not do. Now, what Leonard does bring to your team is he has very good athleticism, and I think within a quick to intermediate passing game, I think he's pretty darn good. But again, because he is just so unaggressive down the field, I just never see Riley Leonard ever being a capable enough starter. That all said, I do think Riley Leonard could be somebody who is used in certain packages along the goal line. Like if you want somebody who can be a tush-push type of guy or somebody who could be used in running quarterback situations, like Riley Leonard can be used in that situation. But as a passer, he just leaves a lot to be desired. He does have a good throwing motion, so I'm not too worried about that. But again, it's just the overall tenacity to go and throw the ball down the field with some level of aggression. He just doesn't really have that right now. I do think he'll be drafted, and I do think for whatever team that does draft him, I do think you're getting somebody who is capable of playing, but I would be a little bit shocked if we ever saw Riley Leonard be a full-time starter. For now, I think he's a really solid backup who can maybe get some playing time in tush-push type situations. Moving on to number 9, I have Kyle McCord from Syracuse and formerly Ohio State. Now, Kyle McCord, funny enough, is one of those players who is kind of a riser in this most recent year. With Syracuse, he had a really solid season with over 4,000 passing yards, 34 touchdowns, and 12 picks. At Ohio State, it felt like he was always just kind of being strangleholded by the situation around him. Like he had so much pressure on him as a player that it felt like he never was able to play like his true self. So when he went to Syracuse, it felt like we kind of got to see what Kyle McCord truly is. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to be a great NFL quarterback, but what I can say is I think that because of his most recent year, I do feel a little bit more optimistic about what he can become. When it comes to Kyle McCord, I think you're looking at somebody who has very clean mechanics, can make every throw on the field, very good lower body, as well as I do think when it comes down to playing within a structure, playing within a play call, this is somebody that can get the job done. The issue for Kyle McCord is while he's not a great athlete, I also think that he's extremely limited when it comes to reading the field. At Syracuse, this was often a guy who would stare down his first target and do a couple things like that. Ideally, you want somebody that can go from one read to a second read to a third read to a fourth read. That is something that Kyle McCord can do. He just needs to be more consistent with it. And I think if he cannot improve that sort of ability in his game, it's going to be really difficult for him to get any sort of legitimate options or playing time. Kyle McCord is somebody who I think just kind of screams backup quarterback. Like he just has the look, the play on the field of somebody who's going to be in the league for probably 5 to 10 years as a backup quarterback who maybe can come in and spot play here and there, which for somebody who's ranked 9th out of a top 10, that's actually not that bad. I think that Kyle McCord is somebody who offers you a pretty high floor but a low ceiling. In terms of his ceiling, I think at best we're talking about a high-level backup who maybe can be a starter here and there. But in terms of being a full-time starter, I just don't think he'll be that guy. Moving on to number 8, I have Curtis Rourke out of Indiana. Now, Curtis Rourke is an interesting prospect because when you look at him physically, you would think that this is somebody that has the skill set of being somebody that could play in the NFL. I mean, the dude has really good size. He loves the game of football. I think he plays with the tenacity that's very similar to Riley Leonard. I also think he's a smart player too. Like he doesn't make too many mistakes and knows when to throw the ball away, knows when to not take a sack. His situational awareness is pretty solid as well. Where Curtis Rourke really struggles, this is somebody that just has a lot of work to do on his mechanics and just overall getting some actual power on his throws. For somebody who is as big as Curtis Rourke, he is somebody that just has no fastball right now. I mean, it is very limited compared to other quarterbacks in this draft class that have some absolute zip on the ball. Curtis Rourke just doesn't really have that. Now, for Curtis Rourke, again, I think he has the size, the demeanor, the look, the feel. He's somebody who I think can be an NFL quarterback. I just don't think he's somebody who, unless he gets a lot of improvement, could ever really be a capable enough starter in the league. Again, if he gets that development and time to actually grow out his arm, work on his mechanics, and really put some power into the football, I think that he has the making of somebody that can be a high-level backup to kind of similar to Curtis or to Kyle McCord, where he can come in and spot play here and there. When it comes to being a full-time starter, that's a little bit of a reach right now. He's going to have to make some serious strides to get to that point, but I do think he has the capability of being in the NFL for many years to come, and with his IQ, with his overall feel and size and all that sort of stuff, this is somebody that's going to be on rosters for years to come. It's just going to come down to, can those mechanics really become something special, and can he put some more zip on the football? Because if he can do that, I do think potentially we could be seeing him maybe get some chances of some playing time here and there. At number 6, let's talk about Will Howard from Ohio State, formerly of Kansas State. Will Howard, obviously, his stock has been rising a lot with Ohio State. Previous to this year, I don't think that many of us thought Will Howard was going to be a serious draft pick, but because he went to Ohio State, had a really good year with some really good players around him, he has played up to a point where I think he is a capable enough quarterback to play. Now, Will Howard, I think his issue is I don't see a very high ceiling. I see somebody with very good size, pretty solid arm, very good fundamentals. He's somebody who knows how to read defenses. I mean, he's played college football for, 5 years at this point, so he knows when it's cover 2. He knows how to throw into cover 3. He knows how to make some seam shots. Like, this is somebody who is a capable quarterback, is a very smart quarterback, isn't going to make too many mistakes, and I think Will Howard is going to be a good player. I feel like he's a little bit maxed out at this point. I feel like Will Howard isn't somebody who is a project player. Like, when you get Will Howard on your team, you're getting somebody that's going to be almost a finished product. Not saying he's going to be a complete finished product. Obviously, he's going to have plenty of time to grow and become a better player, but I just really do think that this is somebody that is going to be a little bit of one of those guys who has a very high floor, but somebody whose ceiling is a little bit limited. Now, I think he has a better chance of being a really good quarterback than everyone before him, because I do think that when it comes down to his overall mechanics, his overall build, his size, his understanding of the game, those are things that he does at a very high level. For his size, I think that his arm talent is maybe a little bit limited, but in totality, I think this is somebody that kind of similar to like a Curtis Rourke or Kyle McCord. I think he will get playing time in the NFL. It's just going to come down to, can he make the most of it, and can he ever be a guy for a team? I think he'll likely be taken somewhere on day 3, and I think that he'll be a worthwhile pick because I think he could be a really solid backup for years to come. The last thing I'll say about Will Howard is he did just win a championship, so he does bring that sort of winning mentality to your program, so you do have to take that as you will. Then we move on to number 6, and it's going to be Jalen Milroe. Now, Jalen Milroe is somebody who you're going to see a lot higher on other people's board. My issue with Jalen Milroe is he is a project quarterback. Like, this is somebody who's going to need 3, maybe 4 years of legitimate work to become a guy who I think can be a capable player in the NFL. Because when you look at his cons, I mean, it's a little bit ridiculous. This is somebody who is not very good under center. His accuracy is poor, very poor for the most part. His ceilings are incredible, but his floors are some of the worst quarterback play you'll ever see. This is somebody who, at the bare minimum, does give you a very high ceiling when it comes to his athleticism. His athleticism is really, really, really good. I mean, this is probably the best athlete in this quarterback class, and I think it's pretty fair to say that he would have been arguably the best athlete in last year's quarterback class. Like, he is a ridiculous athlete. He can run. He's twitched up. He's fast. I think his mechanics are also pretty decent, but it's definitely something that needs to be improved upon. But again, I mean, the highs are so good at Alabama, but the lows were just unbelievably bad. He's similar in a sense to, like, I don't want to compare him to Anthony Richardson, because even Anthony, despite him not playing a whole bunch this season, was somebody that felt like he was a bit more of a finished product, more so than Jalen Milroe. Like, Milroe has played more, but it felt like after Nick Saban left last year and he got to work with Kalen DeBoer, it felt like Milroe took a big step back. Milroe, again, is an extremely high-level athlete, so if you are willing to take a risk on somebody who has a very high ceiling but can also be a complete bust and can probably lose a team your job, then maybe you take Jalen Milroe in like the 2nd or 3rd round. But I think this is somebody who, I don't know if it's going to be too much of a project for most teams to take on. Again, like I mentioned earlier, this is going to be a 3 to 4 year project to get him to where he needs to be. Yes, he is an extremely good athlete. Yes, I think he has really good power in his arm. Yes, I think he's fairly accurate in downfield shots, but when it comes to reading defenses, situational awareness, accuracy, footwork, technique, these are all things that are going to be a lot of work for a coach to take on. So unless you're a team that has a brand new head coach and general manager that has a lot of time to actually give a quarterback time to grow, then I don't see Jalen Milroe being drafted in the first honestly round 1 or even round 2. Because again, I don't think he's going to be starting for a year or two. I think he needs a serious amount of development and time. And unless you're a team like, I don't know, the LA Rams, who could potentially go out there and have Stafford out for 2 years and then have McVay developing Milroe behind him, then that could be a possibility. But even then, I think this is going to be something that is extremely difficult to work on. So yeah, I mean, it's just going to be interesting to see how Jalen Milroe is looked at the NFL level. Moving on to number 5, I have Jackson Dart from Ole Miss. What I like about Jackson Dart is I think he's a really good, kind of similar to Jalen Milroe. I think he's a bit better of a project quarterback. Now, Milroe to me has a higher ceiling in terms of like Milroe's athleticism just makes him somebody that could immediately step in there and still make some plays. Whereas for Jackson Dart, it's going to be a bit more of a project in terms of him just becoming better at reading defenses. The issue with Jackson Dart is there's a lot of unknowns to his game because of the system that he was at with Ole Miss. Ole Miss is a team where a lot of their play calls, there's going to be 1 or 2 reads and everything's kind of customized to what Lane Kiffin wants to do. So if you are Jackson Dart, there's not too much pressure to sit back and dissect defenses. Hey, it's a cover 2 shot. I got to throw it at this certain spot at this certain point. A lot of the time, Lane Kiffin kind of does that for the quarterback. Now, what I will say about Jackson Dart is he's a very good athlete, very good size, has very good arm talent, can make every throw, every arm angle. He's also a bit more of a finished product when it comes to working under center, even though that's not his specialty. It's going to be something that he's going to have to work on. If you guys have been keeping up with the Senior Bowl stuff, Jackson Dart has been working a bit more under center, whereas Jalen Milroe has really been struggling under center. I think Dart gives you somebody who shouldn't start in year 1 or year 2, but if you do want him to be your starting quarterback moving forward, maybe the back end of year 2, you could potentially see this guy become the guy that we think he can be. The dude is tough as nails. He has an NFL look to him, an NFL feel to him. The tenacity is there. I think he's somebody that's willing to do whatever it takes. It's just going to come down to, can he mentally get the game down and become a bit more of a veteran quarterback in situational awareness and understanding, hey, it's cover 2. I got to make sure I do this thing right and do this thing right and working out the offense, because in a lot of ways, Lane Kiffin did that for him. I think this is somebody that could be an NFL starter if the right team takes him and the right team develops him. But I do think in year 1, he needs to probably sit behind a veteran quarterback, maybe like an Aaron Rodgers in New York. We'll just throw that out there. Moving on to number 4, I have Quinn Ewers out of Texas. Now, Quinn Ewers is somebody very similar to Jalen Milroe that is going to be a very, very big project to take on. The reason why I have Quinn above these guys is because, number 1, Quinn Ewers is, I think, the youngest quarterback in this year's draft class. In case you guys don't know, he reclassified in high school, so he came out a year early, and he's also a redshirt junior, so he came out 1 year early out of college too. So we're talking about somebody that is a lot younger, still needs a lot of time to develop. Hell, the dude is younger than me, and I'm 22, so the dude is ridiculously young. Quinn Ewers is somebody who I think has really good arm talent. I mean, he can make every throw when he has time in the pocket. The issue for Quinn is inconsistencies were one thing, lack of pocket awareness was another thing. But I think we saw strides each year. Like, I think his first year at Texas was really rough. He was kind of thrown out into the wolves, but still had flashes here and there. His game against Bama his first year was really good. Then in 2023, again, he took a bigger step forward. So did the Texas program in general, where you saw the highs of Quinn Ewers being a little bit more consistent. Then in year 3, I feel like we saw a little bit more of that, except this time, maybe a little bit more inconsistent. There were certain games, like, for example, the Michigan game, where he was just dissecting the defense left and right, wasn't making too many risks, and when he was making risks, he was throwing really accurate footballs. The issue is when he was bad this year, it was pretty darn ugly. Like, it was forcing balls into tight windows that he shouldn't have thrown, poor mechanics, bad footwork, pocket awareness was horrendous in both the Georgia games, and early in the Ohio State game, it was also pretty bad. But I will say Quinn Ewers is somebody who isn't necessarily a turnover machine. He does know how to check it down and, you know, how to get through reads here and there. It's just finding the consistency with him. I also think for Quinn, really honing in his mechanics is something that needs to be done. He's somebody who's just wildly inconsistent with his footwork and with his mechanics. When it's pretty, it's really good, but it is just a little bit too inconsistent for my liking. And when it comes to pocket awareness, I mean, he is a complete project in the pocket. His pocket presence is just, it's probably the worst out of the top 10 here. The thing is for Quinn is I think if given 2, maybe 3 years of development, I do think he can be a high-level starter in the NFL because of just how talented this guy is. Ridiculous arm talent. I think he's an underrated processor of the game, and I think his situational awareness was also really good. He's also somebody that's played in a lot of high-level, high-stress games, both in high school and in college, so he knows what it takes to get to those points, and he's a veteran quarterback that I really think can be something special in the NFL if given the right coaching and if given the right developments. Again, project player, but I think unlike Milroe, where Milroe is a massive project to take on, I think Quinn Ewers does give you something with a relatively higher floor to what Jalen Milroe does, but also a high ceiling. So, and the other thing too is if you want to replace Jackson Dart 4 and put Quinn 5, I really don't have an issue with that. I just think that Quinn has a higher ceiling because he's a little bit younger. Moving on to number 3 is going to be Dillon Gabriel out of Oregon, formerly of UCF in Oklahoma. Dillon Gabriel is one of the older prospects in this year's class, but I do think what you get in Dillon Gabriel is somebody that can be a capable starter in this league. The question for Dillon Gabriel is he a finished product? Because it feels like he kind of is. Again, one of the older quarterbacks in this draft class, but what you do get in Dillon Gabriel is somebody who is extremely smart, pretty darn accurate. Situational awareness is something that he does a really good job of, and I think he's an underrated athlete too. Now, the other question for Dillon Gabriel is he is probably the smallest quarterback in this class. They say he's 6 foot, but he is probably more like 5'9". He's also pretty light, but not necessarily injury prone. I didn't talk about that with Quinn, but Quinn is also injury prone. And for somebody his size, I don't think his arm talent is particularly special. Like, I think he's kind of similar to, I don't want to say Tua because I think Tua was a better prospect than Dillon Gabriel, but in terms of like not necessarily having the elite of the elite arm talent, then I think you can make some similar remarks regarding Dillon Gabriel and Tua Tagovailoa. Dillon Gabriel is also a left-handed quarterback, which I know a lot of teams don't like that, so that is something you will have to take into account. But I just think Dillon Gabriel is a really safe pick if he is taken within the first 3 rounds. Like, I could see Dillon Gabriel being a spot starter for years to come and potentially being a starting quarterback in this league for years to come because he's just a really safe quarterback that I know I'm getting good football from. Like, I'm not really worried about him throwing turnovers or throwing the ball into pockets he probably shouldn't be throwing. Like, this is a guy who is a bit of a finished product in terms of a lot of things in his game. And I think a lot of the issues in his games are just things that he is physically incapable of actually fixing. Like, throwing a better deep ball is not something that I think he can do because he just doesn't have the size or the frame. But everything else I think is pretty good. So I think that's why I have him number 3. I think he's a very safe quarterback that if he does go to a team that has a lot of talent around him, I think Dillon Gabriel could succeed very early on. Again, it just comes down to he's kind of similar to Purdy in a sense of like, I know that Purdy plays very well in part because of the team around him, but also in part because Brock Purdy is a really solid quarterback. I think if Dillon Gabriel were to go to a situation similar to like Brock Purdy, I think you'd see similar success. Like, Gabriel can be somebody that can play really good football, but isn't necessarily going to elevate talent around him. He's just going to play his game and play at a high level. And I think that's what you're getting in Dillon Gabriel. Then we move on to number 2, Shedeur Sanders. Now, I really am a big fan of Shedeur Sanders. I do think he is worthy of a first-round pick. Maybe not like a top 10 pick, but like a late first. I think he's more than fine with him. Shedeur Sanders has prototypical size, decent athleticism. He's not necessarily someone that's going to be an elite playmaker with his legs, but he is capable of, running the football, kind of similar to like a Patrick Mahomes. Sanders is going to bring the swag. He's going to bring a lot of energy to a team. That's one thing I will say about Shedeur Sanders is this is a guy who has a very good fan base, and if you are a team that is in need of some energy, some juice, like Tennessee, for example, I think Shedeur Sanders could be your guy. Shedeur Sanders is maybe one of the most accurate quarterbacks in this class, and I think his arm talent is underrated, honestly. He has really good zip on the football, and I think his overall mechanics are very sharp. The question for Shedeur Sanders is this is somebody that does sit in the pocket for a little bit and does kind of sit there and think a little too hard sometimes. Like, he can sit in the pocket for 5, 6, 7 seconds, which is just not going to work in the NFL. His pocket awareness could also use a little bit of work too. I think if his pocket presence does get down though, and he can be Brady-esque, I think he could be a really good quarterback. For me, I would love to see him go to Las Vegas. Now, I am a bit of a Raiders fan, but I also think that him being alongside Tom Brady, who was obviously a part of that Raiders team, I think would be a really awesome fit to just kind of get somebody who was not necessarily the most athletic guy in Tom Brady, but was somebody who just knew how to read pockets and knew how to move around. If Sanders can get that level of coaching, then I think he can be a really good quarterback in the league. The question for Shedeur Sanders is, again, number 1, the pocket presence stuff. Number 2, he's not much of a playmaker. This is somebody who, when he gets out of the pocket, he's not Josh Allen like. He's not Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes like. Like, those guys are your top level level quarterbacks, hence why I don't think that Shedeur Sanders should be a top 5 pick. But what I do get in Shedeur Sanders is somebody that can dissect defenses with his arm talent and overall ability. It just comes down to, can he get that pocket presence stuff really figured out? Because if he can figure that stuff out, then I think as a pocket quarterback, he can be pretty darn good. It's just going to come down to, does he have the ceiling of being a top 10 quarterback because of his limited playmaking ability? If he can get that playmaking ability down pat and actually at a high level, I think he could be a top 15 level quarterback. But for now, I think he's more of like a Ryan Tannehill, maybe a Dak Prescott-like quarterback, which Dak Prescott I think is an excellent quarterback, but even then I think Shedeur Sanders reaching a high of Dak Prescott would be really impressive. Moving on to number 1, we all know who it is. It's going to be Cam Ward. Cam Ward is probably the only quarterback in this draft class that I think is definitively worthy of a top 10 pick. Cam Ward gives you everything that you really want within a franchise quarterback. Really good size, good arm talent. Pocket presence can be a little bit worked on, and kind of similar to Shedeur Sanders in terms of like he'll sit there in the pocket and run around for 10 seconds, which just won't work in the NFL level. But unlike Shedeur Sanders, Cam Ward does give you that playmaking ability, which will give him a bit of a higher ceiling over a guy like Shedeur. I don't think he's as accurate as Sanders is, because I think Sanders is extremely accurate, but I do think Cam Ward is accurate enough. It just comes down for me that the playmaking ability of Cam Ward is just off the chains. Like, this dude can run around, make some plays, can throw from all different arm angles, and is actually a really good athlete. So if you do need him to go out there and run around, he can do that. The thing is for Cam Ward is I think he's good at a lot of things, but he also does have a couple issues he is going to have to work on. Number 1, just staying on schedule. This is somebody that, like I said earlier, he just sits around in the pocket, will run around there for 15 seconds, and you just can't do that against guys like Myles Garrett, TJ Watt, Micah Parsons. That just won't work. I also think footwork, mechanics can be a little bit inconsistent, but if those guys do fix those issues, then I think Cam Ward can be a really good quarterback. He's somebody that's played a lot of football, knows how to read defenses, and I think could be a day 1 starter because of his overall ceiling of being a high-level playmaker. The only thing is that I will say he needs to go to the right team, because I think if there is a team that tries to make him a pocket quarterback and tries to limit his playmaking ability, he could struggle. But if you get a team that is willing to let Cam Ward just go out there and cook, then I think he could be a really good team and a really good quarterback. But you guys let me know in the comment section below, what do you guys think of my top 10? Do you agree or do you disagree? And if you enjoyed, hit the like and subscribe button. Love you guys. Peace.